Daniel Walton, National Secretary of the Australian Workers Union. Thanks for joining us again on Flow.
Cheers, Ricky. Thanks for having me.
Now, we've got these comments from Attorney General Cash, a spokesperson for her office, saying, they've flagged that this decision that you were celebrating about a week and a half ago on the Horticulture Award, it's still a draft, it's not a final decision yet.
Yeah, that's right. The Fair Work Commission said they wanted to take some extra feedback on board around some of the final terms, but the substantive decision was to rule in favour of our case, which is to provide at least a safety net for those workers working on piece rates around our nation's farms. I think it would be silly for the government to want to dive in to really appeal this and to want to challenge it. I think this is going some way to provide some certainty for tens of thousands of workers in what is a well-known exploitative industry.
Now, when you say it's a well-known exploitative industry, you're talking about a general trend of behaviour in the industry, or are we talking about a few bad apples in the batch? How widespread is exploitation of farm workers?
Yeah, unfortunately, the Minister Littleproud continues to say, this is just a case of a few bad apples. But even the government's recent reports that were commissioned, I think, and chaired by John Azarias, handed down a number of recommendations and substantive findings, which again further add to every other report that has been undertaken in the last decade, be it from the federal government level, Senate inquiries, committee investigations, state governments, territories, academic studies, all come back to say the same thing, that the fruit and vegetable industry in our country is the absolute centrepiece for exploitation. It's been going on for a long, long period of time, and we continue to try and do whatever we can to improve conditions for workers in the industry. And the case we ran and the decision we got will hopefully go a long way to help that.
Now, we picked up yesterday the Greens MLC, David Shoebridge. He seems to think it goes so far as modern slavery in Australia. He's trying to get a referral of the industry for investigation at the New South Wales level. Do you agree that with the description of what's going on as modern slavery in Australia?
Yeah, we've definitely seen examples where that's taken place, and I think the simple way of having a look at it is, before COVID struck, there were a lot of workers that came over via plane arrival and tourist visas, holidays, coming over here as supposed tourists, been met at the airport, whisked onto a bus and then driven out into regional centres around the country. And for a lot of those workers, they've had their passports taken off them and they've been forced to work and remain on our farms. And in many ways, they are sort of trafficked around as human trafficking, moving them from farm to farm. And there's definitely some examples of that. There's a lot of other practices in place which are equally abhorrent. I think what the proposal is the start of trying to put greater emphasis and responsibility on employers to make sure the right thing is actually happening, not to really turn a blind eye and say, is anyone really going to mind or is anyone going to say anything? It's actually really ramping up some restrictions to fundamentally get everyone to, sort of lift their socks up and start improving some of the conditions in this industry.
Well, on the conditions in the industry, the farm labour shortage, I think in your press release about the initial decision from the Commission, you described it as a so-called labour shortage, which when we put that to Minister Littleproud, he said union leaders should make their comments closer to farmers than 30,000 feet above them. What's your response to that?
Well, number one, it's a stinging blow from a politician who's the son of a politician who's a banker of all people, making an assessment on officials who represent the actual workers being exploited on these farms. Ricky, unfortunately, I've spent a great deal of time focusing on this industry now for the last couple of years, and I continue to be saddened by some of the stories that we see. But a lot of amazing people, local workers, Australians that have grown up working in this industry, and also a lot of workers that have come from overseas to try and provide a better life for their families and their communities and have suffered some pretty horrible things. What we know is a lot of workers, particularly local workers, young workers in regional centres, are reluctant to get involved in this industry because they know it's not a great employer. They've seen all the stories, they understand the issues in place, so they're having a look at giving it a miss. And we wanted to use the pandemic as the opportunity to break the addiction to cheap and temporary labour, particularly visa workers from overseas. And the government is trying to resist that. The Minister Littleproud has not called out one single employer or one single case of exploitation in his entire time in the role. And that, for me, given all the highlights, all the cases, all the coverage, all the news, is absolute testament to the fact that he doesn't want to do anything to change the conditions in this industry, that he is happy to let the exploitation continue on.
Well, the circumstances you described would feed into the ag visa. I know there's been some comments from your union about that, where they're looking to basically provide a pathway for citizenship for people, say, from the Pacific Islands to come in, or from Southeast Asia to come in and become Australian citizens by starting their life in Australia working on farms. What are the concerns of the union around the ag visa?
Yeah, so if that was to be true, and if there was anything in writing to back up what the government is saying by way of policy or actually detail, regulation, whatever it may be, it would be a step in the right direction, giving overseas workers an opportunity to come over to Australia, to be able to spend some time working, to be able to establish roots into the communities is a good thing. That's the way the migration should work, not in terms of workers coming over for 2-3 months, being forced to work in slave-like conditions and then going back to their home country. That's not what we want. We want Australia where everyone gets a chance at a fair go, where you do get a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. That is what the good migration programs in years gone by, decades gone by, that's what they were built off the back of. Now, unfortunately, with this agriculture visa, what the government has done is announced something on the run, and they're scouring to try and pull together some information about how it's going to work.
So you're concerned that they're sort of dangling the prospect of citizenship for those that might come initially under the visa, but there's no guarantee they might even get it?
Well, Ricky, at the moment, they haven't even got a country to sign up to it. Like, the reality is that this visa was done as a political deal because the UK government, through Boris Johnson, said they don't want any of their workers coming over, their citizens coming over as backpackers in Australia to work on our farms. Now, they did that because they know the experience of their young citizens working in our backyard. Now, that is not a great outcome. We know that there are other countries looking to do the same. So the government rushed without any consultation or engagement. They rushed to make this announcement. And bit by bit, we've been engaging with them and the department. They're trying to put all the pieces of this jigsaw together. But all of those other countries who are looking there at the moment, the ASEAN nations, about 22 of them, I think, in total, are standing back, having a look, seeing what's happened to the Friends in the Pacific, seeing what's happening to local workers, and they're yet to sign up to the government's proposal.
And that's, because you raised that, I have to put to you, the Minister said earlier in the week directly that Labor and the union movement are the reason why these countries are standing back, because the Minister says that you're bad-mouthing the ag visa. How do you respond to that?
Well, if you to sign up to the Minister's approach, what are we going to do? Dig a hole and put our heads in the sand and wander around like emus? I mean, goodness sake. The reality is there's so much exploitation taking place in this industry that Blind Freddie knows that if you go to work in the fruit and veg industry, chances are you're going to get ripped off. And what we are trying to do is fix that, because we want to make sure that there is fairness across the board in every industry. Unfortunately, in agriculture, it's the worst. So we want to do everything we possibly can to make it better. Part of the case we ran was to make sure there is a safety net in place. So for any of your listeners who don't know, if you worked on piece rates before, it was originally designed that you would earn a premium on top. So if you pick more, pack more, stack more, fill your crates, punnets, whatever produce you're harvesting, you could earn more than the minimum. Now, unfortunately, some people worked out that you don't even have to pay the minimum. There was a flaw in the system. Never meant to be that way, but there was. And so what happened was a lot of workers were not even getting remotely close to the award rate. In fact, we had cases put forward and now evidence put forward that workers were getting paid as little as $3 an hour. And fortunately for us, the Commission saw that. They ruled in our favour, and now there's a safety net. So if you do 8, 10, 12 hours a day, you're at least going to get that. If you're more efficient, you're more productive, you can earn in excess of that. That's a good outcome, but it goes, Ricky, to the fact that we are trying to improve the industry to give confidence for workers to give it a go.
Well, Daniel Walton, the broad-ranging comments there. It's all interconnected matters, and we thank you very much for your time. It's much appreciated.
Thanks again, Ricky.